my husband became violent towards me after discovering my infidelity, leading to my homelessness and subsequent refuge in a women's shelter. The fluorescent lights of the shelter flickered, casting an eerie glow over the sparse room. In the corner, on a worn-out cot, lay Camila, her gaze fixed on a small crack in the ceiling. Each line seemed to echo the fractures in her own life, a once picture-perfect existence now shattered beyond recognition. Her thoughts drifted, unbidden, to the events that had led her here, to this moment of desolation. It had all started with a seemingly innocent friendship with a colleague, David. Camila had never intended for it to become anything more. But as they spent more time together, what began as casual coffee breaks gradually evolved into intimate conversations, shared secrets, and eventually, stolen moments. She knew it was wrong, but the thrill of the affair clouded her judgment, blinding her to the consequences. Then came that fateful evening when Sebastian, her husband of 7 years, discovered the truth. The memory of his reaction was still vivid in her mind, like a nightmare that refused to end. Sebastian, always the gentle and loving partner, transformed in an instant into a visage of rage and betrayal. His outburst had been violent and explosive, a stark contrast to the man she thought she knew. In his eyes, she saw not only anger but also a deep, cutting pain, the kind that could only be inflicted by a loved one's betrayal. The physical altercation that followed was brief but intense, leaving both of them shaken and Camila bruised, both physically and emotionally. She had never seen Sebastian like that, never imagined he could be capable of such violence. And yet, there it was, the irrefutable evidence of the harm they had inflicted on each other. In the aftermath, as the reality of what had happened sunk in, Camila realized she could no longer stay. She left their home that night, driven more by fear and confusion than a clear plan. With nowhere else to go, she found herself at the doorstep of a women's shelter, her pride swallowed by necessity. Now, as she lay there, the weight of her choices pressed heavily upon her. She thought about the affair, about how meaningless it seemed in hindsight. Guilt gnawed at her, not just for the betrayal but for provoking a side of Sebastian she never knew existed. Was she to blame for his violent outburst? Could she have prevented it? These questions haunted her, offering no easy answers. Around her, the shelter was quiet, save for the soft, rhythmic breathing of other women, each with their own stories of hardship and survival. Camila felt a kinship with them, yet also a deep sense of isolation. They shared the bond of being outcasts, yet each was alone with her own regrets. As the night wore on, Camila's thoughts wandered to the life she had left behind: a comfortable home, a loving husband, a sense of security. All of it was gone now, replaced by uncertainty and fear. She wondered if Sebastian was thinking about her, if he regretted his actions as much as she regretted hers. But as dawn began to break, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Camila realized that some things, once broken, could never be fully mended. Her affair had set in motion a chain of events that had led to this moment, and there was no going back. The future was a blank canvas, daunting in its emptiness. As she closed her eyes, trying to find solace in sleep, one thing was clear: the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But for now, all she could do was face each day as it came, one painful step at a time. Camila woke to the sound of soft murmurs and the rustle of movement. The shelter was waking up, its inhabitants starting another day in their transient lives. She sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, feeling the stiffness of her body from the unforgiving cot. The room, filled with rows of similar beds, was a stark reminder of her new reality. As she made her way to the communal bathroom, she passed faces, each marked by their own tales of hardship. Some avoided eye contact, lost in their own worlds, while others offered a faint, knowing smile. In this place, privacy was a luxury, and Camila felt the weight of so many eyes, each carrying their judgments and sympathies. Breakfast was a simple affair: cereal, toast, and coffee, served in a small dining area. Camila found a spot at the end of a long table, keeping to herself. Around her, conversations ebbed and flowed, snippets of life stories shared over steaming cups of coffee. She listened, her heart aching with the resonance of shared pain. Each woman here had faced her demons. Camila was just beginning to confront hers. Later that morning, she attended a group counseling session, a daily routine in the shelter. A circle of chairs filled a small room, and as she took her seat, she felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. One by one, the women shared their stories. When it was Camila's turn, she hesitated, her voice barely a whisper as she recounted the events that brought her here. The words felt foreign, as if she were talking about someone else's life. As she spoke, she felt the eyes of the other women on her, their expressions a mix of empathy and curiosity. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, heavy with unspoken understanding. Then, an older woman named Mariana spoke up. Her story was one of decades of abuse, a tale of resilience in the face of unimaginable pain. Camila listened, feeling both humbled and inspired by her strength. The session ended with a sense of camaraderie, a bond forged in the fires of shared suffering. Camila realized that she was not alone in her journey. These women, each battling their own demons, were her companions on this path of healing and recovery. In the afternoon, Camila visited the shelter's resource center, where staff members offered assistance with legal advice, job searches, and housing applications. She felt overwhelmed by the bureaucracy, the endless forms and procedures. Her life, once defined by routine and certainty, had become a maze of uncertainty and confusion. That evening, as she lay in her bed, Camila's thoughts turned to Sebastian. She wondered where he was, what he was doing. Did he miss her? Did he regret his actions? Or had he moved on, erasing her from his life as easily as one wipes away a smudge on a mirror? Sleep came uneasily, filled with restless dreams of the life she once knew. Camila realized that this was more than just a physical journey, it was a journey of the soul. She was not just seeking a new home, she was seeking redemption, a way to forgive herself and to find peace in the chaos of her shattered world. As the darkness enveloped her, Camila made a silent vow. She would not let this experience define her. She would rise from these ashes, scarred but stronger. This was not the end of her story, it was just a painful chapter in a life that was still being written. Sebastian sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the silence around him a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded here just weeks ago. The shadows seemed to mock him, reminding him of the love and laughter that once filled this space. Now, all that remained were echoes of a past he could no longer return to. He picked up a photo frame from the coffee table, the glass cracked in the corner, a casualty of that fateful night. It was a picture of him and Camila, smiling at a friend's wedding. They had looked so happy, so in love. Now, looking at Camila's face, he felt a pang of guilt so intense it took his breath away. Sebastian had always prided himself on being a calm and reasonable man, but the revelation of Camila's affair had shattered his self-image. He had reacted in a way he never thought possible, succumbing to a blind rage that now haunted him day and night. He couldn't shake the memory of his own hands, the violence they had inflicted. It was as if he had been possessed by a stranger, a version of himself he didn't recognize and couldn't reconcile with. The days since Camila left were a blur of confusion and remorse. He had tried to reach out to her, to apologize, to explain, but she had vanished, leaving no trace behind. He didn't even know if she was safe, if she had somewhere to go. The uncertainty gnawed at him, a constant reminder of the consequences of his actions. Sebastian's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his phone ringing. He glanced at the screen. It was his sister, Anna. He hesitated for a moment before answering, not sure if he was ready to face another person's judgment. "Sebastian, how are you holding up?" Anna's voice was laced with concern, a soothing balm to his turbulent emotions. "I'm managing," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Have you heard from Camila?" she asked tentatively. "No, nothing," he said, feeling a lump form in his throat. The conversation was brief, filled with awkward pauses and unspoken words. Anna offered her support, but Sebastian knew there was little she or anyone else could do to mend what was broken. After the call, Sebastian wandered through the house, each room a reminder of the life he and Camila had built together. Their bedroom, once a sanctuary of intimacy and comfort, now felt cold and impersonal. He noticed Camila's things, still scattered around, a book on the nightstand, her perfume on the dresser. They were like ghosts, remnants of a presence that was no longer there. That night, as he lay in bed, Sebastian's mind raced with questions that had no answers. Could he have done something differently? Was there a moment, a turning point, where he could have saved their marriage? The weight of his guilt was suffocating, a heavy cloak that he couldn't shed. In the darkness, Sebastian realized that his life had irrevocably changed. The man he thought he was, the life he thought he had, were both illusions, now shattered beyond repair. He was left with a haunting question: who was he without Camila? And as the night stretched on, the question remained unanswered, a riddle that echoed in the silence of the empty house. The city park was bustling with life, a stark contrast to the turmoil within Camila. She wandered aimlessly among the paths, her thoughts a tumultuous sea of memories and regrets. The sun was warm, but she felt a chill that seemed to seep into her bones, a reminder of the cold reality she now faced. As she walked, her eyes caught a familiar figure sitting on a bench. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Sebastian. He was staring into the distance, a look of deep contemplation on his face. For a moment, Camila considered turning back, escaping before he noticed her. But something, perhaps a need for closure or a lingering thread of connection, held her feet in place. Sebastian looked up, and their eyes met. Time seemed to stand still as a multitude of emotions passed between them in a silent exchange. Camila took a deep breath and approached, her mind racing with 1,000 things she wanted to say. "Sebastian," she began, her voice barely audible. "Camila," he replied, his voice tinged with a mix of surprise and something else she couldn't quite place. They sat in silence, the words they needed to say stuck in their throats. Around them, the world continued its hustle, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding on the bench. Finally, Sebastian spoke. "I've been looking for you. I wanted to apologize." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Camila felt a surge of emotions: anger, relief, sadness. But overriding them all was a profound sense of loss. "I know you're sorry," she said softly. "But that doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change how things ended." Sebastian nodded, his eyes downcast. "I know. I wish I could turn back time. I wish I had handled things differently." The conversation that followed was a delicate dance of words, each trying to navigate the complexities of their shared past without causing further hurt. They spoke of the affair, of the night that had changed everything, of the pain and betrayal they both felt. As they talked, Camila realized how much she had missed Sebastian, not just the man she had married, but the friend he had been. And yet, she knew that the chasm between them was too wide to bridge. Too much had happened, too much had been broken. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows on the ground, Sebastian reached out his hand, hesitating for a moment before placing it over hers. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. "I'll always care about you, Camila," he said quietly. "No matter where life takes us." Camila felt a tear roll down her cheek, a bittersweet acknowledgement of what they had lost. She squeezed his hand gently, a silent thank you for the years they had shared, for the good times that were now just memories. They parted ways as the sky turned a deep shade of orange, each stepping back into their separate lives. The encounter had been brief, but it had given them both something they desperately needed: a chance to say goodbye, not just to each other, but to the life they had once dreamed of building together. As Camila walked away, she felt a sense of closure, however incomplete. Their story had ended, but her journey was still ongoing. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, she could find her way again. The days melded into one another, each indistinguishable from the last, as Camila navigated her new life with a stoic resignation. The shelter had become both her sanctuary and her prison, a constant reminder of everything she had lost. Each morning, she woke to the sound of others stirring, their movements a symphony of shared struggles and silent resilience. Camila spent her days attending workshops and counseling sessions, trying to piece together the fragments of her broken life. The staff at the shelter were kind, but their words often felt like band-aids on a wound too deep to heal. She found some solace in volunteering at the shelter, helping others who were in situations similar to her own. It was a small distraction from the relentless tide of her own thoughts. One afternoon, while organizing donated clothes, Camila received a call. It was from a friend she hadn't spoken to in months, someone from her old life. The conversation was awkward, filled with cautious pleasantries and unspoken questions. Her friend mentioned Sebastian, hinting that he was struggling to cope with the aftermath of their separation. Camila's heart clenched at the mention of his name, but she offered no response, her own pain still too raw. Meanwhile, Sebastian found himself in a downward spiral, his days and nights blurring into a gray haze. The empty house was a constant echo of Camila's absence. He threw himself into work, trying to drown out the memories that haunted him at every turn. But the silence always returned, louder and more oppressive with each passing day. He tried dating, a feeble attempt to fill the void Camila had left, but each encounter left him feeling more hollow. The realization that he was searching for something that no longer existed was a bitter pill to swallow. Sebastian knew he had lost more than just a wife. He had lost a part of himself, a part he feared he would never regain. As the season changed, so did the landscape of Camila's life. The shelter, once a place of refuge, began to feel suffocating. She knew she couldn't stay there forever, but the thought of leaving, of facing the world alone, filled her with a paralyzing fear. Her dreams were still haunted by memories of Sebastian, of the life they had once shared. She woke each morning to the stark reality of her loneliness. One evening, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Camila allowed herself to think about the future. It was a blank canvas, an expanse of uncertainty that stretched out before her. She wondered if she would ever find peace, if she would ever be able to forgive herself for the choices she had made. In his own home, Sebastian faced a similar night of introspection. The realization that life would never return to what it once was hit him with an overwhelming sense of finality. He understood now that some things, once broken, can never be fully repaired. The man he was with, Camila, the life they had built, were gone, leaving behind a void that could not be filled. As the night deepened, Camila and Sebastian, each in their own world of solitude, came to a silent acceptance of their reality. Their story had ended, not with reconciliation or redemption, but with a quiet resignation to the paths they had chosen. They were survivors, forever altered by the choices they had made, walking parallel roads that would never meet again. The dawn broke on a new day, bringing with it a fragile hope, a whisper of the strength they would need to carry on, each in their own way, each on their own journey.